Hi, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have really inspiring conversations with artists living in and from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Yakic. Kia ora, welcome back to the Creative Matters podcast, and a very happy new year to you. This week I'm speaking with Anna Gibbs. Anna is a contemporary painter living in Banks Peninsula near Christchurch in the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. If you search her name on Google, you'll see she is described as an internet personality. I'm not sure if she's happy about that or not, but it probably comes from the amazing work she does on the Instagram social media platform and her loyal audience of more than 100,000 followers. Anna is interested in conservation and fortunate to live on a rural lifestyle block populated by many native birds and plants. Her oil paintings are inspired by her daily observations of the interaction between native flora and fauna. She is deliberate with her composition, and whilst her work is detailed, she describes her subject with neither abstraction nor absolute realism. In this episode, we have a fabulous chat about all sorts of things, really, such as why Anna likes to gild her backgrounds with 24-carat gold leaf, and her delicate gilding process, her strong connection to New Zealand native birds, even though she was born in England, and why she loves to paint them, and her passion for conservation. Anna speaks of her apprenticeship with painter Judy Curnow, who studied with legend New Zealand painter Tim Wilson, and how that influenced her painting approach, particularly with glazing techniques, and helped her confidence as a self-taught painter. We explore her painting process, framing, the size of her paintings, her gorgeous studio, how she prepares for an exhibition, and her upcoming show at Little River Gallery. She shares some tips for Instagram and how she feels about this platform. This is another quite long episode, but it's full of really interesting tips and treasures and is so worth listening to. Maybe you could listen over 2 walks or 2 commutes or 2 art-making sessions, however you like to listen. You can view Anna Gibbs' unbelievably beautiful paintings at her solo show, South Island Songs, at Little River Gallery from January the 30th to February the 24th, 2025. Enjoy. Hello, Anna.
Hi, Mandy. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for coming. This is really super exciting. So we are zooming from Muriwai all the way down to Banks Peninsula near Christchurch in the South Island of New Zealand. A very big warm welcome to the podcast.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. Down here in Banks Peninsula, I'd really love to come up, but sadly the logistics of it were just going to be a bit tricky. Really, really fabulous to be talking to you today on Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, with a 6-month-old baby and a 4-year-old and a busy painting practice with a show coming up, I'm not surprised you couldn't actually get away. So thank you very much for your time today. Can't wait to hear all about you and your practice, Anna. I feel like I have kind of got to know you through your amazing Instagram, but it's nice to actually meet in person, kind of. So you're living in Banks Peninsula. Can you tell us about that place and what you love about it?
I am just completely in love with Banks Peninsula. I live in an outer bay, which kind of, if you're local to the area, the peninsula's kind of, I think, 3 volcanoes that stick out from the side of New Zealand, and Christchurch is just nearby on the mainland. And the central kind of harbour, there's a town called Aotearoa that's probably the best known part of the peninsula. And we live just out the other side. So the Aotearoa town looks over the harbour and we look out onto the ocean up here. And we're quite high up on the top of the hill on our little lifestyle block. And it's just stunningly beautiful. Yeah, so there's a massive amount of kind of natural wildlife and natural plants and birds here, which obviously for me is important to me, both in terms of my welfare as much as as my interest in my work as an artist. And it's just stunningly beautiful, kind of the hills and looking out over the ocean. And there's lots of natural reserves where people have gone to great lengths to kind of re-establish the original ecosystem. And you can go on beautiful walks through those little reserves with waterfalls and obviously tons of native birds and plants. And there's just also an incredible community. I think particularly living in an outer bay, we only got phone connection a couple of years ago, if maybe not even that long ago. And so there's a really kind of old school, every neighbor helps every neighbor. And we have coffee mornings and we turn up each other's houses with random cakes and eggs. And everyone comes to the rescue if someone needs help with something. And that's just completely magical and so special. And I think something that we as a family value so much, having particularly come from London, which has a lot going for it, but that sense of community is obviously just not what it's known for. And yeah, I think that whilst it was daunting, being off grid a little, we've got mains electricity, but when we first moved, there was no phone signal, and we collect all our water still now from roof collection in a spring that feeds the troughs. So it was kind of really a bit of a big change to come somewhere that is so different and a completely different lifestyle, but one which we've just absolutely loved.
It sounds so gorgeous. And as you said, such a contrast to London. So can you take us back, Anna? You were born in London and you grew up in various places across the south of England. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how whether you were a creative child at that time?
So I was born in London. I lived in London for a little bit after I was born. And then when I was about 5, we moved to the US and then back to the UK. And so, I moved around a lot. When I was really young, I think I must have been about 3. I have a really vivid memory of the first time I was kind of playing with modeling clay at preschool, and I made this clay strawberry, and I just had this. I was just amazed that you could take this thing that you could make into different shapes and you could make it look like something else. And it was like I was hooked. I was just like, let's do that again. Like, this is so much fun. And I think I can remember just loving anything creative from a really, really young age. And I was completely obsessed with wanting to spend all my time doing creative things. And it wasn't necessarily fine art. Like, I really enjoyed baking cakes that looked like cool things, or making kind of in the UK you have like a class in school which is called design technology, where you make things out of wood. It's more crafty, I guess, almost, and anything designing stuff or drawing, painting, or traditional art I just loved. And I used to go and stay with my grandmother, and one time I was making art there and I accidentally spray painted her washing machine in silver. I think she was very nice about it. I don't know if actually she was okay as an adult, looking back, as she pretended to be. But yeah, I think I just couldn't get enough of it. And at school, at primary school, I got extra permission to go in at lunch break to do more art and design. And would just be in that space, making all the time as much as I could. And it just, any time in my life where I've gotten busy with other things and I've not been making stuff, I've found it's, irrepressible, and I suddenly am.
At high school, were you starting to kind of find your own creative style, do you think?
Yeah, I think I was doing so many different things. I don't think it was all channeled into fine art. So I, from a fine art perspective, was really particularly interested in portraiture and life drawing and form, and mark making and that slightly more traditional, I suppose, aesthetic in art. And but alongside that, I was like making clothes with a sewing machine for costume parties for friends, and also making clocks that looked cool and vases. And so I just was doing lots of different things, and it wasn't like it was all channeled into like this one voice as an artist that's saying something. And I think I definitely wasn't mature enough, to be honest, even if I tried to do that. I think I didn't know myself well enough. And in some ways, I think if you are trying to do that when you're young, I mean, some people just are there already. They're just very mature in that way. But I think for me, I don't know that I'd have found that from within myself when I was at high school. Yeah.
And you say that you ended up teaching. Were you thinking that you would like to study art at uni, or were you just interested in education at that time?
Yeah, no, I never planned to be a teacher until about a very short time before I became one. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I thought a lot about doing something, either being an artist or kind of going into a creative job. I looked at architecture and that kind of thing. Alongside being really into all the creative stuff, I was really interested in a lot of academic subjects too. And I was a nerd. I'd say I was a bit of a nerd, but no, I was more than a bit of a nerd. I was a massive nerd. And so I was always kind of torn that it wasn't that I didn't love the school part of school, the non-creative subjects. And I was a bit torn as to what I might want to do. I mean, a lot of people go to university in the UK. It's almost a sort of default, I think, for a lot of people in a way that I found it's not necessarily here, particularly if you're finding academic subjects are not too, out of your comfort zone. And I was really particularly interested in philosophy, which I never really studied as a subject as part of the curriculum, because it wasn't on offer where I was at school. I was ultimately narrowing it down to really, really wanting to go to art school and really, really wanting to study philosophy. And I had these big philosophical questions that I just really wanted and needed to kind of explore and I mean get answers with a naive perspective, because let's be honest, you don't really come away with actual answers. But I just really wanted to understand those big open questions that not everyone's interested in, but like what is reality and what's consciousness and what's morality, and like why does the world work the way that it does, and where does it come from, and what is all of this? And it's a big part of who I am, and it's there in my art as well. It's just not, very obvious potentially. But I basically decided that I'd apply for Oxford University to study philosophy, politics, and economics, which is the kind of degree there there's not very many options where you can study philosophy, and you can't study philosophy on its own. And that degree is one where you kind of also look at the structure of societies and things, which really interested me. So I went for that, and it's quite hard to get in. So I kind of thought, look, like I'll leave it in the hands of fate. And if I don't get in, then we can have a go at art school. And if I do get in, then I'll go. And there's an art school there, and I can go to the classes at the art school. And my degree won't be in art, but I can still explore a lot of art while I'm at the university. And I did get in. So I went, and I did do a lot of particularly more skill-based art classes there, lots of life drawing and those sorts of more how you make things approaches rather than the more conceptual side of it. And I wasn't really trying at that point to make anything particularly meaningful that was coming out of me. It was more just the process of making and being engaged with that, and having some creative space. Then, I went out of university and needed a job. So I ended up basically applying for a job as a teacher, because it was the right time and the right place, and it all came together and I got the job. And then I was teaching, but I wasn't teaching art, I was teaching economics, because that's what my degree was in the UK. You have to teach a subject you have a degree in at high school. And so I was teaching economics alongside, continuing to do a lot of art in my free time.
That kind of degree has really influenced your art practice now in some way, probably more than you realise. So from the teaching, how did you get to the point of becoming a full-time artist? I mean, obviously you came out to New Zealand at some point. So can you just talk us briefly through that journey from teaching to becoming a full-time artist in New Zealand?
Yeah, so I was a full-time teacher, and then I moved to a different school, and I got very involved in the kind of welfare side of the school, so helping students who were struggling with mental health or family problems. And then I went down to 4 days a week, partly to give me more time to do art, partly just to give me a bit more space, because it's very intense and I'm quite a strong introvert. So obviously being in a school environment is pretty full on. And so I was making art all the time that I was teaching, constantly in the evenings and on weekends and in the school. Like, art teachers are obviously very happy if you say, oh, can I like pop into the art department and make something, can I, hang out and do some stuff. And then I started doing these kind of semi-abstract acrylic landscapes, I guess is what I would call them, that were colorful, and again very much was making them just for the sake of making. And then a couple of friends asked to commission pieces or buy the ones that I was doing, or like another teacher. And I think the idea of being a full-time artist and making a living out of it felt like a really nice dream, but not something that would be very achievable or practical or viable. And so I was really not focused on what it would take to make that happen. And then I began the journey of trying to have a kid. And in the process of doing that, I had a miscarriage and had struggled a bit with my mental health, and then did successfully kind of get pregnant and have our first daughter. And that was in the middle of the COVID, kind of the first wave of COVID. So COVID kind of hit the West. And then I was, already 8 months pregnant, 9 months pregnant. So I gave birth in the middle of, mega lockdown in London.
That would have been quite stressful, I imagine.
Yes, it was very stressful. And I think I was carrying a lot of the trauma from the miscarriage as well, which I didn't realize at the time, but looking back. And so it was, I was just in survival mode. And I got postnatal depression, and I was doing my best to manage, but it was tough. And then I had always planned, when I was on maternity leave, to come out to New Zealand and potentially move to live here, but there was no firm decision. And then when we, were dealing with COVID, it kind of made sense to come out here. And because of COVID, no one was planning that far in the future. So we just came over and thought we probably would stay forever, but, we weren't 100% sure, and we couldn't plan moving all of our belongings and everything. Nothing felt like it would be that easy to organize. So we just came out with the baby and moved in with my parents, and then lived with them for, I don't know, about 6 months maybe, before we got our own place. And in the time when we got to New Zealand, it was a huge relief. I think I felt safe, suddenly being out of London in a rural environment in a country where COVID obviously wasn't prevalent in the same way. And that space and time that I had kind of led me to think, well, I really want to make some art that's coming from me and is kind of engaging with what I value right now and what's important to me. And the first kind of couple paintings I did, one of them was like a mum sort of swallow with her chicks, and it was that maternal nature, New Zealand environment, this thing that seems so special and magical to me about this country, all coming out of me in the form of painting. And I wanted to make it beautiful, and I wanted that beauty to sort of translate the preciousness that I felt, that I associated with it. I made those paintings, and then, people were enthusiastic about them, and I kind of took them to a local community gallery, and they were really happy to get me to. I did some more. I didn't put those ones up, so do some slightly better ones. And then everything went from there, really.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience, and I'm very sorry that you experienced a miscarriage. That would have been devastating. So your parents, are they English as well, and they lived in New Zealand already?
Yeah, they're originally from the UK as well, but they've lived here a really long time. They moved over when I was still at high school. I stayed in the UK because I wanted to see out high school there. And
they live nearby now?
Yeah, they're about half an hour away.
Which is amazing with your kids.
Yeah.
And now you've had, is it another girl?
Yeah, another girl, yeah.
And how is your mental health this time?
Been great. I think really since getting to New Zealand, I've just been in such a good place. And that's, something I treasure and I'm grateful for every day.
So you once you got to New Zealand, you had decided that you were going to paint full time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people on this podcast have talked about imposter syndrome. And so I think it wasn't that I sat there and was like, I'm going to be an artist. Kind of more, let's make some paintings and kind of see what happens and where it might go. And I was on maternity leave from my job in the UK still. So I just, was able to, had all the security to, which is invaluable. And so I made some paintings, and then it just went from there really. And then I kind of committed to doing it as if it was a full-time job. And I'm really quite disciplined about the time in the studio. And I think that is a lot of other artists I've spoken to, that's the same for them, that you've got to sort of, if you want to make this what your full-time project is, then it's full-time. And I will often do 6 days a week if I've got a lot on, or work in the evenings if I've got stuff to finish. But at the very least, I'm working kind of normal office hours in the studio and making all that time. And then inevitably, you're going to come out with something, hopefully.
Yes.
At the end of that. And some of it's experimenting, and some of it's executing something you've come up with.
Let's just start talking about your art practice. I mean, I'm looking at you here, and you've got two of your most gorgeous paintings behind you, which are absolutely stunning. Oh my gosh. I actually really do want to come down to your show and just see them in real life. But we'll talk about the show in a minute. So could you please describe your art practice to somebody who hasn't seen it before?
Yeah, so my paintings are, the painting part of it is generally quite traditional realism, oil painting, and particularly the birds are highly detailed. I often will kind of enhance colors a bit, or play around with them, play around with light, and will I'll be a bit imaginative and creative, I suppose, in how the birds look, as opposed to it just being like copying a photo. But essentially there's a lot of realism that goes into how the birds look and the style of painting that you'd kind of call that. And then the backgrounds of my paintings are gold leaf, which is like a gilding process. So gilding is the process of basically getting thin sheets of metal and then kind of putting that on something solid. And it's really, really old. I mean, thousands of years of, I think people have been gilding, lots of historical religious artworks will have like gold leaf on them, and furniture. And so I did a course with someone from New York called, I think, Charles Douglas, and learn how to do that. And it's not easy. At the beginning, it took a bit of practice. But so the background of the paintings is this gold leaf, and I use 24 karat gold, partly because I like the sort of texture and softness of it when I'm working with it, and also because it's conveying that's pure gold, that's as pure as gold can get. And so it's that value that I'm associating with nature that I want to communicate in my art. And so therefore I want to use the really valuable materials to do that as best I can. And also because it's completely inert, so it's from an archival perspective, it's obviously great. It will never discolor or rust or anything.
How did you actually come to using gold leaf?
So I had seen bits of gold leaf being used in art a lot. Obviously, like Klimt would be a classic example that people are aware of. I went to Vienna and saw his work there, and it's beautiful. I think, I mean, beauty's subjective, but for me, there's something magical about it. And I really love light, and I look a lot at how light reflects off things and changes the color of something. And so working with that material, it's really conveying that sense of beauty and preciousness, and almost like, we value jewelry and we value these things that are sort of delicate and colorful, but with gold, and they're shiny, and it's that treasure, that scarce, precious thing. And that's how I see the birds that I'm representing and how I feel about them. And so I'm kind of wanting to use materials and techniques that convey that and make that connection with someone looking at it. And that when people look at the paintings, they feel joy and connection and value that they're then associating with the birds that I'm depicting, and the nature and the ecosystem that comes with that.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it works really well having the kind of colorful birds, or sometimes not colorful, like my Katuku, obviously, and not that colorful. But yeah, it can be very striking visually, and getting people's attention and helping them connect emotionally, which is really what I'm aiming to do.
There are so many organisations and programs around conservation in Aotearoa, New Zealand. What conservation projects most inspire your work, do you think?
The focus of my work at the moment is massively on New Zealand native birds, and the conservation efforts behind them are therefore kind of very important to me. And I, as I think I mentioned earlier, went to the White Heron Sanctuary Reserve in the West Coast, and that was incredible. But I also really admire and follow closely the work being done by the Kakapo Recovery Project, and they are just amazing, and rehabilitating them is no easy thing, and really, really wonderful. And then the area where I live is, I am so grateful and value so much being able to see these native birds all the time, and having access to a nesting site with the New Zealand native falcon and tons of tui and karuru is really mainly thanks to the hard work being done by the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. And they are just relentless and give so much time and energy towards that commitment. And then alongside the Predator 2050 project, the Predator Free program, where we live will actually become part of an area on the peninsula where it's going to be, completely predator free is obviously the long run goal. We'll start with possum, and there's lots of plans in place as to, how we're going to upscale the trapping that's going on. And there's already big sections that are totally pretty much possum free, but extending that and having a big section of the peninsula out here where we live that are going to be real sort of special reserve and habitat for all these native birds. And it's just amazing to be living right amongst it. And I have so much respect and admiration for these hardworking people out there. And I mean, there's many more. I feel, the Kia people, obviously, and everyone at Dock. And yeah, so I feel like I am invested as an artist in working alongside that, but I have just a strong sense of admiration and connection to those people who are directly putting their energy into the actual conservation, and that's really crucial. And yeah, completely. So important to me, to my work, to this country, to the ecosystem, the culture, our future generations. So I think my enthusiasm for New Zealand native birds and conservation around them is probably absorbed from my parents, who are incredibly invested and passionate about New Zealand conservation. And I therefore knew quite a lot about it before I even lived here full time. And I think absorbed that from them, and it's infectious. And that's what I'm now trying to do. I want to affect everyone with millions of, I think it's 80 million years of evolution in New Zealand, independent of other continents, meant that there were bird species here that are just unlike anything else that's ever existed, because it was the only place without the mammals that would be, predators to something like a kakapo. And as we can see now, that there are the mammals and rodents, it changes completely the way that the ecosystem works. And it's 80 million years of evolution to create things like kakapo and kia that are just so special and tui. And I don't, think it's difficult to, once you put it in front of people, convey how incredible these things are. But my passion for them is part of, I suppose, the inspiration and the motivation behind what I'm painting. And so I want to really focus on New Zealand native bird species. And then in terms of the compositions of the pieces, a lot of it, inspiration sometimes comes from seeing them in real life. I did one of a tui on a red hot poker, and that was literally from seeing them. And the kind of golden grass in the summer when it's really dry behind, like my gold backgrounds. So I was like, the glowing red with the sun coming through it and the gold. I've got to paint it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, obviously, like the kakapo, I can't, and I hope one day I will be able to, but I can't for the time being get access to seeing them in real life. And so it's much more a question of exploring that. And I'll also explore things online and through other people's experiences, and try and pull together. It's almost like a portrait, I suppose. And I always really loved portraiture when I was younger. So doing portraits of the birds that are conveying what's special about them in the imagery.
It makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, the birds have just got such a softness. And then I love the way sometimes, what they're sitting on is quite contrasting in color or texture or light. Um, and then the gold behind, just all those different elements make a really sort of unique, gorgeous composition. And they are absolutely beautiful. I have read that you said you'd rather people think or connect to the sense of beauty and more so than the intellectual side, potentially. Um, so what is it about that, do you think? Where's that come from?
Yeah, I think going back to when I studied philosophy and the question of what is art and what makes something art, and I think I was drawn to this way of looking at it where art is really the process of someone making something that doesn't serve a functional purpose in its own right, but connects with other people emotionally and creates that subjective reaction that is, or joy or and it could be a negative emotion, some really powerful art obviously is not conveying positive things, but for me I'm kind of leaning more into the positive emotional side of it. And that is, I think, if I have deep down my sense of what art is that it's that relationship, that communication between me, the thing I'm creating, and how someone's responding to that.
As you said, you do capture these beautiful birds in a very realistic way. It's almost hyper realism in some ways, isn't it? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I always feel it's that same imposter syndrome, I guess, where I don't feel like I'm an expert on what the difference between hyperrealism and realism is. But I guess why I don't see it as hyperrealism is because I'm not recreating something exactly as it looks in reality. And so I am editing and slightly stylizing the image of the bird compared to what it would look like if it was right in front of you.
Yeah.
So it's still realism. It's very clearly representing the thing that you see when you look at the painting, but it's not to the exact detail and accuracy that it's trying to make it look like it is right in front of you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Why do you think you like to enhance some of the birds in your paintings?
I think it's going back to what we were saying about creating that sense of things being precious and valuable and trying to convey that as best as possible. And I think that's not done through hyperrealism. I think that's better done through having a bit more creative exploration over the way that I am painting them, the way that I'm using colors, the way that I am putting them in poses, the way that the light is interacting with them. And so it's for that ultimate aim of what I'm trying to do with my work, I suppose, that I think that is served better by not going down that super high. I don't think realism for me isn't about the challenge of painting something accurately. It's about creating work that is as powerful as it can be and communicating with the people that are looking at it, the
Yeah.
response and the emotional reaction that I'm aiming for.
And you seem to have just really refined the skills in the work that you do. How did you actually come to having those techniques and skills to make these kind of paintings?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I mentioned before about the gilding, but actually even more instrumental in my approach to painting was, as I kind of, without explicitly saying it, alluded earlier, I was doing acrylic painting before in the UK. And when I came to New Zealand, I started working with oil painting, and I did an apprenticeship with an artist who was local at the time called Judy Curnow, who's now living further south. And she had studied under Tim Wilson, who is a pretty well-known, iconic New Zealand artist who does these. I mean, if people don't know him, you should, because it's just mind-blowing. His paintings are these absolutely jaw-dropping, realistic landscapes that are not representative of any specific place in New Zealand. They're kind of generally representative of landscape areas that you see, but they're just the quality, the impact of the paintings. They're successful, they're incredible, they're amazing. And so Judy had studied under him, and he had kind of taken the techniques that the old masters had used to create those really incredible paintings that they did, and then used modern sort of reinterpretations of that. And so then Judy studied that under him and took her work in a kind of slightly different direction. And her work's much looser than mine, and it's more flora and less of the animals, and is just very similar in terms of the connection with joy, but coming at it from a different angle. And studying with her really just took my painting to another level. And that was absolutely instrumental in being able to create work that was impactful. And yeah, working with Judy was really crucial to the approach that I was taking to how I was working with the paint, the material, and the techniques, and crucially this glazing, which is basically building up translucent layers of paint rather than just making the mark that you then see as one layer. And again, it's all about light. And so when light comes through paint, it looks different. So if you imagine looking at a piece of colored glass on the table versus a piece of colored paper, you're going to see something very different when the light goes through the colored glass and bounces back at you, and it's glossy and it's glowing and it has that lifelike quality versus just a matte colored piece of paper that's completely opaque. And sometimes you need opaque parts of your painting, but largely my birds and a lot of the background is done through these layers of translucent paint and building them up. It's a slow process, but it's very impactful. And so I guess then having the gold coming through that, very often, particularly the plants in the background, I'll have as translucent. And you've got glazing. So imagine then, you've got your colored glass with gold leaf underneath. And that richness and that vitality that you get when you're trying to convey those qualities is so impactful. Yeah. Judy, it was really special to be able to spend time with someone in their space and talk to them and get to know them and feel encouraged by them. And that was just, a really generous and crucial thing that gave me confidence, gave me skills, improved the quality of the work I was making. And sadly, Tim Wilson had passed away from cancer at that stage. So he wasn't with us, but I saw his artworks and they, are just amazing. Judy had one in her house. So
amazing. Beautiful. And were you looking for that kind of mentor or that kind of training? Did you feel like you needed that to continue, or how did that actually come about?
Yeah, I think I created those first couple paintings, like the one I was talking about with the swallows. And as I was doing that, I was thinking a bit about how can I improve my painting. I was sure that the quality of my oil painting wasn't as good as I would feel comfortable with it being if I was going to start showing these pieces to other people and putting them in spaces like galleries. And Judy was in the community and enthusiastic about helping and supporting me. And I'm not the only person, she's so generous of that. I'm not the only person. And I was thrilled that she had offered. And so it was very special and very, a big step in the right direction that was by her.
And great for your confidence, I imagine.
Massively.
Yeah. And glazes, I'm not really familiar with glazes, but are you adding a glaze to the oil paint, or how does it actually work?
So if you think of oil paint as basically being the powder, that's the color, and then there's the oil, which is what makes it oil paint. So you're taking that colored pigment and you're mixing it with oil. And so naturally, when you buy oil paint, some of them are more opaque than others. And, people who are familiar with using oil paints will be very kind of conscious of that. You can then add extra oil. So you're basically just diluting the strength of the pigment. So you're really creating a much thinner density of color in the paint. And then when you're applying it, as you make the mark, it's a translucent layer that's gone on. And so it's tinting something that's a bit more yellow, a bit more green, a bit, and therefore then creating the ultimate image you end up with out of those layers building up on top of each other. And then through what I learned from Judy and then practice over time, you develop your style and you have the confidence to know a particular approach to doing that is going to lead to it looking a certain way. And then I can now think, I can envision in advance, if I take this approach, this is how it's gonna.
Because I guess oil painting is quite a long process anyway, but then adding all the glazes and the layers and building it up in the way that you do, it must be very laborious. And then you have all those sort of final details, which adds another amount of time as well, plus the gold leaf application. So, yeah, they're very special paintings. So it would be actually great now to talk about your process. I'm dying to hear more about how you apply the gold leaf.
Some artists are using imitation gold, which is basically copper mixed with other metals to look gold colored. And you see that quite a lot in little pieces in people's work. And I know a couple other artists that work more in the style that I do with the more traditional methods and more traditional kind of pure metals, who follow slightly different techniques and then create these indentations. But I will usually just actually try and create a really smooth surface. So I work on board instead of canvas, because canvas has such a, like, what seems to me a strong texture. You've got to start with, or go, really heavy on gesso to get rid of. So I work on board, which you can sand just super, super smooth before you even start, and then do the gilding with the gold on top of that. You obviously have to seal the board and do all the priming, and that in its own right is quite a long process, because I'm really keen to make sure that that's very thorough and very careful. And because of the gold, if I if I don't sand one part of the board properly, it will be visible. It's going to be noticeable. So you want to
Really?
really
Wow.
pay a lot of attention to doing it carefully. And then, sometimes I will paint on top of the gold, and sometimes I will leave a patch and then paint on that. And sometimes I will paint opaque on top of the gold and then color on top of that. And then sometimes I'll paint just translucent paint on top of the gold. So there's like a whole range of different sort of options, I suppose. And for me, I found, like, when you see a tui, they look black, but then they're not. They're these incredible metallic colors. And so if I start with a black background, so I have the area of the painting the tui is going to go is black, and then I'll often get a white pencil and sketch out kind of roughly where the different parts of the bird are going to be. And then I'll go over the top of that with oil paint, glazing color on top of black. So again, like, imagine a color piece of glass, but going on top of black paper that's underneath. And therefore you're getting that sense of like what tui look like, which is this sort of glowing metallic, but on the background of it being a dark bird as light catches it. And then sometimes if it's the Karuru, for example, you get these really vibrant pinks and blues, and to capture that, I found better to do the glazing over a very light or white base. And so a bit like, again, you've got your coloured glass over going white paper, so you get that much vibrant, like. And so it really, it depends which bird and what I'm trying to do with it in terms of how I approach it. And that's why I think there's no one specific way and then the nightmare of the kind of endless problem that if you apply more gold after you started painting, then you can get bits of gold in where you've painted, and then you've got to try to fix that. And then if you paint after you've done the gold, you get paint on the gold bit.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine it would be really tricky.
It's super delicate, and I tend to come out the studio for a coffee and I am covered in paint in my hair, on my face, in my mouth, like all over my clothes, and the painting's immaculate. There's like not a single drop of paint in the place that there should be. And I think it's like that hyper focus of what I'm doing, and everything around it becomes complete carnage. But over time I'm now, it doesn't stress me out. It stressed me out when I started working this way, but now I kind of don't even actually worry or think that hard about it.
I mean, it is, your work is finished so beautifully, and so you don't necessarily do the gold leaf first all the time. Depends on how you want to work.
I guess I probably don't ever start painting, and I would never have painted a bird and then put gold on without any gold going on before that. But sometimes I'll do the gold around a patch where the bird's then going to go, and sometimes I'll do the gold over the whole surface of the board, and then So yeah, it just depends really. And I guess over time it's evolving, and the way that I'm doing it is slightly experimenting almost with each
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do, and maybe actually slightly this way or a bit that way, or and if something works well, then that then becomes
New way. Yeah. And do you find that it's very delicate, as in sort of, I just can't imagine how you can rest your arm on it or anything like that if you're then painting afterwards, after you've put the gold leaf down. How does that work?
Yeah, you just have to be careful. It scratches incredibly easily, and that's very difficult to do much about. You can sort of do something about it, but it's not straightforward, because if you put two layers of gold on top of each other, it looks different than just one layer. So
Mm.
it's not like you can just patch it up very easily.
And it's not the kind of thing you want to do layer upon layer upon layer because it would be way too expensive.
It's so expensive, so like insanely expensive. And that was again at the start, buying high quality paints and using the gold at the start when there wasn't any guarantee I would sell things, or I'd sell them for any significant amount of money. Took a bit of courage, I suppose, to decide that, well, what I want to do is make the best work I possibly can, that I think is executing what I want to do as well as I possibly can and not cut corners. And if ultimately then it doesn't go anywhere, that I've tried. And sometimes I did a whole degree in a subject that is now only kind of sideways related to what I'm doing. And sometimes in life you just have to kind of invest in yourself and in doing something and hope that it's going to work out. And it's a privilege to be able to do that, but I did have that opportunity and I don't regret it.
Mm.
But it's
Well,
it's it's insane. It's like I have to not think too hard about it, because if I'm holding the tiny little delicate piece of gold that could fly away in the breeze in 2 seconds and thinking that it's $10, it's like watching money like literally
I
disintegrate.
can imagine. I mean, I guess it sort of just adds to the richness and the sort of preciousness of your process.
Yeah, I think it's hopefully helping and creating this imagery that's capturing people's attention and transferring this sense of value and importance, that I
Mm.
really want people to kind of stop and think about nature and think about the ecosystem and this really special species that are here, and
Yeah.
and feel the joy that they bring to us, because they do, and that's so special.
Yeah. Yeah. And you captured that so beautifully. And so back to your process, do you have photographs that you then draw up on your board, or how does that work?
Yeah, so jumping back in time again, I at one point when I was working as a teacher, was traveling a lot in between school term times and the holidays. They have quite a long school holidays in the UK, and so I wanted to be able to keep doing art while I was on the move, and couldn't sit on an aeroplane and just get out my set of acrylic paints. Like, can you imagine? So I wanted to get into digital art, and I got an iPad and Apple Pencil by basically going around the house and finding anything that I could sell on Facebook Marketplace, and then using the money to buy the iPad and Apple Pencil. And then I started doing and just experimenting with digital illustration, I guess is what you'd call it. And it was, you basically build up, it's very similar to glazing, which is why when I started glazing, I was like, oh yes, like I get this. I've done a lot of stuff like this where you have layers. And so it's one layer of a line drawing, and then on top of that, a layer of sort of one color, and then another translucent layer of something else, and then highlights. And so I was doing a lot of digital work that was building layers to create images, and a process that corresponds slightly to the glazing technique. So I basically became very confident and comfortable working with digital images and digital imagery. And so now I will study the birds in their natural environment if it's ones that I can access, and obviously with some birds in New Zealand that's harder. And then also take my own photos, study the photos other people have taken. I will take different images and sketches and photos, and then often develop them into a representation of what the final painting is going to show as the composition. And
Mm.
I'll have pulled together a lot of things that create a digital image, basically a digital drawing. and it'll have color and layers and a lot of, sometimes almost like you would do collage with paper. So I'll take like little pieces of things and then put them together, or I'll just have like separately from the actual composition, like a little photo I found that's a close up of the purple on a tui. And then I'll be like, I want that purple. I want that purple. So let's that purple. So that, like that will also go in there. And then that will be my kind of base point. And often the plants or the background kind of flora and fauna is much less developed at that stage. It's kind of, well, sort of beyond, like the one of the falcon that I've done recently, he's on a branch looking out, which is how you tend to see them when they're still. And the branch, I think I just sort of put like a very rough sketch of some kind of branch and then knew what I wanted to do with the bird, and then added the branch in and experimented as I went along. And that was a more intuitive kind of like following my instincts to the branch evolved in the making of it, rather than it being predetermined.
And then you take your digital drawing and transfer it onto the board with pencil?
Yeah, so I have tried using a projector. I'd say that my ability to do that is about as good as my parallel parking. Like, how I'm now having had a go at it. How do people do this? It's like, how do you get it square on in the right distance? And then I like go in between and I'm in the way of just, I did have a go at that briefly and was like, this is madness. So I will tend to just draw onto so let's say if it's a tui, I'll start with the black area of where the tui is going to be, and then in white sketch the kind of where the eye is going to be, and this is where those neck feathers are going to sit, and then we'll kind of work alongside my digital image to kind of then create the bird off the back of that. And then the two I've done for the current collection that have trees as the kind of focal point, with small kia in them as well, but the trees are dominating the composition in a way that is new to my work, where the trees were much more of a free process of painting, where I just made marks, and the marks partly stood where the tree ended up, and then it was, the mark went where it did, and I tried to be super loose and expressive, and then I'd see like, oh, there's I think there's a branch there, and then that would, and so it was evolving, and that was a different way of working on the thing that was then going to be the focal point of the painting. I've done that a lot with the sort of secondary elements of the plants that are in the paintings of birds, but to be creating works that were dominated by the trees. And that was really off the back of seeing the kahikatea trees in the West Coast, and I just couldn't get enough of them. They were just the branches and the moss on them and the way that their trunks came out of water, and everywhere I saw them in different contexts, they were just unbelievable. And I really wanted to put that in a painting. I think I often have this compulsion it's like an itch that needs scratching. I need to get that thing that's got under my skin into a painting and put it out there and try and convey, I suppose, what's got under my skin to other people.
Yeah. And you do that so beautifully. And all of your paintings, even though like this one has a different compositional feel, they still feel very, very much connected. And how do you actually think about composition? What is it that you're trying to achieve, do you think, compositionally?
I think the composition, I've come over time to realize it mattered more than I thought at the outset. I think you can get a bit stuck in the beginning on like how well you're executing something in terms of the skill that am I happy with how the light or the color or the detail is? And actually you're not seeing the wood for the trees. Like, you've lost sight of what the impact of the painting is having on people. And often those things aren't that significant, but the composition really, really is. And so I think in terms of what the composition is, I'm trying to achieve the same thing as always, which is this response in someone when they're looking at it, and this portrait of the bird that represents what they're about and what's special and how that can make people feel. And so it's playing around with composition until I'm happy. And sometimes it comes really quickly and something comes together, like the tui with the red hot poker. And sometimes I have, for every painting I've done, I don't know if I even want to think how many composition sketches that are just no, it's not. That one's not there. It's not. And I'll come back to them sometimes, and then I'll move it around a bit, and I'm like, oh, now it's working. Now I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? How much that sort of influences the impact a painting can have on just that tiny little adjustment of placement.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're not necessarily putting the birds in the center. And then you've got to consider, I suppose, the very flat, plain background, although it's not actually flat, but, just that one color of background, which must influence the way you think about composition as well.
Yeah, and I guess what one of the challenges initially was that you can't, in a digital format, see gold, right? Like it's never going to look like it will. And so it's that ability to work alongside the kind of sketches where I'm getting things out of me and putting it together with my mind's eye and my ability to envision what will this be like? What will it feel like when it comes together? And practice, experience, time making them and seeing how they came out. Like I think that just does then start to really come quite easily to me now. But yeah, definitely took a lot of, there's that thing, if you do 10,000 hours of something, then you're going to be proficient at it. And I have done obviously insane number of hours now working with executing a painting from the very initial seeds of inspiration to what it comes out as.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you would have done so many hours, I can't imagine. We're just going to take a very short break from this chat with Anna. It's time for our weekly creative notice board. If you'd like to promote something creative, please do get in touch with me by DM on Insta with your ad, which will be no longer than 3 sentences. I'll also be doing a call out every Friday on Instagram to remind you. Visit Arts Incorporated Heratonga on Russell Street in Hastings to see Maiken Calcoon's exhibition Building Memory, which runs until the 1st of February. She is exhibiting over 40 paintings which depict the architecture and built environment of Hawke's Bay, as well as some iconic landscapes. Maiken's passion for living in Hastings is expressed through her vibrant paintings, which capture light and architectural detail in bold compositions. Hopefully you can make it. Now back to our lovely conversation with Anna. And how do you actually think about scale? I know you've done really quite a large one for the show that's coming up, which we'll talk about shortly. How do you decide on the size of your painting?
Oh, it's interesting that you asked that. I guess that's not something I've thought that hard about. Maybe because when I have an idea, it's almost one of the first things that's kind of a decision that I've made without really thinking about it. Is like, oh, this one's a small painting. Like this is I'm doing a tomtit and with leaves around it, and it's a little moment in the bush. It's a little moment seeing them and capturing that in a little painting, and then seeing this socking great tree and being like, we can't do this without going big. We got to go big. So sometimes I guess the painting's driven the size it ends up more than it being like something I have to think that hard about. And a lot of my paintings are the medium size. By far the majority of my work is that kind of very medium, and I'm more often portrait than landscape orientation. And again, I don't even know if I'd have to think why or how that's come about, but definitely seems to be my go-to.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you've got this beautiful studio space, which I think you've just recently moved into, which looks absolutely stunning. And I notice on your Instagram, we've got so many positive comments, and we'll talk about Instagram as well. How do you actually work in your studio? Do you have quite a few paintings on the go? I know they take you such a long time. How do you kind of work between works, especially when you're preparing for a show?
Yeah, I have a lot on the go at once. So there's always at various stages something that's being born and something that's being nearly finished. And the nearly finishing is definitely the thing I'm less good at, is that sort of last 10%, and then saying it's done and being okay with that and letting it go. And often the good thing about being under pressure to get stuff done is that it kind of forces me to not.
Might be
Yeah, that's why it was so crucial for me to have a bigger space to work in, because I was working in a tiny room, and I was so nervous all the time that I'd sort of stand up and accidentally knock a painting that was drying behind me, or and so we built this sort of shed studio outside the house, and I have now a much bigger space. And yeah, so I have several on the go at once. And for the glazing, that's pretty crucial. And in terms of working towards an exhibition with several paintings in, I just have to be reasonably good at planning ahead. And I work from a timeline that's very long. So if I'm talking about doing something that's a project or an exhibition in the future, I can only be making commitments that are very far in advance, and then I can sort of vaguely work out along the way how everything's going to happen in time. And in that process, I guess sometimes paintings take a lot longer than I think they will, and sometimes they're quicker. So you can't perfectly predict, but I have a reasonable idea of how long they take, and when they take longer than I expect, that's when I'm working on.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this is just going to have to get done. And I go in the morning and I'm like, I'm going to paint really fast today. And then, like, obviously, no, that's just not a thing. You can't possibly paint faster than your natural pace of actually putting the marks down. But yeah, it's lots of pieces on the go, definitely.
Wow. And how many paintings do you think you complete in a year on average?
In a year where I haven't had a baby, probably around 20. Like, again, depends if I've done any really big ones versus more smaller ones. I did the largest painting I've ever done, that went up to Art in the Park in Auckland, and that was a huge painting with kakapo in, and I won the Premium Artist Award up there for that, which was really incredible and exciting. And that piece in its own right took such an insane amount of time that, you're kind of like, well, we've got to count that as more than one.
I guess, that, like you say, because paintings take so long, you've got to really think about how you're distributing your work. I mean, you have Little River Gallery you're represented by, and then also Flagstaff Gallery, and then you also have commissions sometimes. So just balancing, what you can commit to at different galleries, and then what you can commit to people who want a commission. It must be quite tricky. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I started out in the local community gallery in Aotearoa that's called the Orion, and I've got to be immensely grateful to them for that, and I would still potentially occasionally put a piece in with them. But otherwise, yeah, Little River Gallery, local to where I am in Banks Peninsula, and then the Flagstaff relationship was really born out of Art in the Park, and I haven't done a lot with them so far at all, because I haven't, we're still in the window of time between getting into talks with them and then actually seeing through something that they are just Carrie and Sophia are just the best people ever, and I really love working with them. But yeah, I have to be very conscious of how much time things take to do, and so I've got to make plans really far in advance, basically, and I can't. I would love to, but if I get contacted by a gallery at short notice who are doing a conservation thing, it's normally not going to be feasible for me to give them work. And I'm also, I think, reasonably keen on the idea of just not being spread across loads of different galleries. If I do 20 paintings a year and I was represented by like 5 galleries, it doesn't
There's no way.
It's not logical.
No.
So yeah, at the moment I'm just going for kind of just that Art in the Park Flagstaff relationship, and then the Little River Gallery down here is my main primary focus.
And you said earlier that you do enjoy commissions, and sometimes you get commissions out of shows, and also, I guess, privately people call you. But it is something that sometimes you have to kind of turn off. It's not an option for people to commission work. depending on how busy you are. So how do you actually run that, and what do you like about doing commissions?
So I try to make space as I look at the year ahead of me for both commissions and whatever the project is that I'm working towards, like the solo show that's about to open. And therefore, I'm not, I think otherwise I might just never get any commissions done. Because I'd be constantly just focusing on whatever the project was that had a deadline, that some event was going to happen. And the commissions, therefore, I kind of have a separate, it's not literally 3 days a week and 2 days a week, because that wouldn't make sense logically, but that sort of mentality about it. So I'm doing two jobs. I'm doing the commissions, I'm doing the projects. And to have a baby and get this solo show done, I did have to take a bit of a break from commissions for a while. But I love doing them. I wouldn't want to not do any commissions. And some artists I know really are not enthusiastic about it, but I really, really enjoy talking to someone about what is it they've come to me and they've connected with my work in some way. And so exploring what it is that captured them and why it matters to them and what they get out of looking at it. And often people have an idea about maybe the size of painting or where it's going to go in the house and potentially what specific bird they might want featured. But I am only really open to commissions that are largely up to me to determine what the painting's going to look like. So I wouldn't do commissions that are prescribed by the person commissioning them. It's more just a process of me developing a painting alongside someone who their specific subjective relationship with the work is the one that is going to be critical in what I'm looking to kind of execute. And so, yeah, going back to what I was talking about before, that sort of that circle of like me making something, it having an impact on someone, and that being art. And so in a commission, you can treasure that whole triangle right there and then from the very, very early conception of the piece. And that's wonderful. And I had a commission from someone who was a Kiwi living overseas, and they wanted something that connected them back to New Zealand while they're not here. And so exploring that and their family and something which then was meaningful to them and achieved that goal of what they treasure about the birds here and the plants here and the nature of New Zealand, and then having a little piece of that in their home all the way across the world.
Yeah, that's
so
really
I just love
beautiful.
it. Yeah.
That's gorgeous. And I can imagine that kind of process is actually would be very positive and would just sort of add even more meaning to what you're creating in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it can be a huge source of inspiration for me. Like I probably my favorite part of the whole artistic process is the inspiration. It's why I have like 10 ideas for every one painting. But you've got someone to team up with. It's a team game
Yeah.
now. It's, like, oh, cool. What is it? Is it the colors? Is it the bird? Is it and that conversation, that two-way discussion about that connection that's happening via my work and then working towards a particular piece can be great and push me in a slightly different direction than I might otherwise have on my own. And some of my favorite things have been born out of that. And it's fun. And it's fun just having another person who's following the journey with you. And I think what helps, I suppose, in a way, is that the realism part of my work creates a degree of consistency that allows someone, if I do a sketch of what the composition is going to be moving towards, they can kind of get a reasonably good feel of where this is going to end up. And so far, I've never had anyone look at the sketch and not then be like enthusiastic and great, let's go for it. So I think it's I don't have that apprehension that I might do something and then it doesn't convey what they are hoping it will for them, because my work's more controlled, I think, than some other artists and their technique and style, which would be potentially much harder to know where you're going to end up, because the artwork's happening as it's happening. And so trying to do a commission then is awkward sometimes.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And you did mention before we started recording that somebody asked you to paint a unicorn, which was quite interesting. And I presume you didn't respond that favorably to that idea?
I don't think I was nice to them. But no, it was pretty firmly no. I used to do pretty much any birds that were kind of real birds, and particularly if they were culturally significant or endangered across the world. And now I'm really just only doing native New Zealand birds. And that might not be the case forever, but that's very much the focus of my work. And I think narrowing the spectrum of what I'm doing down to that has really helped. And I felt really comfortable with that move and that decision. And so now I'm only for the time being doing. Yeah. I mean, I think I found it difficult sometimes if it was a bird that I didn't have a relationship with. And so it was then quite a lot of work to develop that relationship. I'd have to come at it where it's like, okay, well, I need to learn a lot about what this bird's about if I'm going to do a painting of it. And therefore, and then in my heart's not in it in quite the same way, because like the spark that's there for me in doing the native New Zealand birds is such a big part of that kind of energy that I have to put into the work, and that compulsion to get it out of me and to communicate to other people. And you almost can't control that. And so I think if I was trying to paint something that my heart wasn't really in it, it would be not such an enjoyable process, probably not such a successful painting. And so in order to get sufficiently invested in those other paintings of birds that I didn't have a strong relationship with or sense of connection to, it was difficult, and it was a bit of a distraction, I suppose, from the rest of the work that I was doing for kind of projects I was working towards. And so it's been really nice to be able to narrow it down. And I think it's what is quite nice is it's the other way around. So what I'm now doing is people who are overseas that are connecting with my work, one of my pieces, they need to learn about these birds and what's special about them. And that's great. If I can infect other people out there with getting under their skin, getting them to learn about, connect with, understand the importance and significance of these birds in this ecosystem, how awesome is that? How awesome is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It totally is. So let's just talk a little bit about your upcoming show. So, I can't believe that you're a mum of a 6-month-old baby and you've been preparing for it. So well done, you. Your show is called South Island Songs, and it's at Little River Gallery in Christchurch from the 30th of January to the 24th of February, 2019.
Yes. So the opening event is on Saturday, the 1st of February at 2 p.m. at the gallery. And it's not an exclusive event. People who are in the area are totally welcome to come along. And then there'll be previews before that. I think the paintings will be up from Wednesday, but if people want to see them on the Wednesday, that might need to be a booking. Whereas Thursday, Friday, if somebody wants to see them before the exhibition opens, they can come and have a look at them. And if people are interested in seeing the kind of catalogue email of all the paintings, they can sign up with the gallery, and that will go out probably on the Tuesday beforehand. And then the exhibition will run, as you said, until the 24th of February. And anybody who is kind of just going through the area can come and have a look at them. And there'll be 11 pieces in total. And they are a range of different South Island New Zealand birds from the kind of the south side of, half of the country. And really focusing, again, that sort of narrowing. I think I just thought, having been to the West Coast and down to kind of around Queenstown and Wanaka and that whole area, I wanted to really focus on the birds that I was connecting with in that area. And the Katuku that I've done was off the back of going to see the nesting site on the West Coast and the White Heron Sanctuary tours who took me on a tour to see them. And that's the only nesting site in the country. It's super special to have been there and seen that. And then, and the Kia. And I wanted someone to come into the space to look at the collection of pieces together and to get not only that sense of connecting with any one individual bird, but the ecosystem and the birds collectively, in this sense of, what's special and impactful about one is only hopefully going to be even more impactful and special about standing in a space with lots of them.
Absolutely, yeah. I imagine the impact of all of the works together, I just can imagine would be...
Yeah, but I've got them all squashed in my studio here now, and it's already cool. It's cool time that having 11 finished all in one go is going to be cool, going to be
Yeah.
to have that space.
The moment, but yeah, hopefully people listening can come and visit because I imagine, like a lot of paintings, when you see them actually, in real life, the impact would be even incredible.
I think they feel really different in person than in a video or a photo. And I tend to get that reaction from people when they see them for the first time in real life, and trying to capture something that's reflecting light, because the gold is obviously reflecting the light in the form of a photo or video, is actually incredibly challenging and distorts
Yeah.
colors. And, if I try to photograph a painting of a Carrero, then because the gold dominates the image, the camera just sort of seems to turn every other color blue. And so it's just, and obviously when it's gold and you're walking past it, the light's changing. So the background's not a static, fixed image. In different light at different times of day, looking at different angles, it looks completely different. And so I think seeing them in person is a totally different thing to seeing
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
digital representation.
I can imagine. But, they still are very beautiful when you look at a photograph, which is kind of good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you think about framing for your whole show, are you wanting to connect the frames and make it quite cohesive, or how do you see that?
Yeah, the frames aren't all identical. Obviously, like smaller paintings have slightly slimmer frames than the bigger ones, but they're all of the same style, with this sort of wood frame where you can see the wood texture, with a dark stain on it, and then the gold trim around the edge. And I spent a lot of time thinking about framing my work, and then developed this style of framing that I've got at the moment, which Ronald Mottram in Christchurch do, and they are just incredible at framing. And so all the pieces in this collection have that same style of
Mm.
frame. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. The dark wood with that little trim of gold, which is next to the painting, is really it's just perfect because it's also got a dark line between the gold leaf and the gold edge, hasn't it? So it just seems to be the most perfect frame possible for your work.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I really love how they work with the frames. Definitely.
They're beautiful. Yeah. So just talking about what we mentioned earlier, Instagram. You astound me with the way that you approach Instagram. Yeah. Yeah, you seem to have a real affinity. I mean, you did say you were an introvert, so it is quite amazing to me that you are so comfortable you appear so comfortable with videoing yourself. You have 100,000 plus followers on your artist Instagram page, which is up your brain and get. I know you've done a course on how to manage Instagram. So yeah, I'm sure me and the listeners would be very intrigued to know, some of your approaches and how.
The beast of Instagram. So I think Instagram is just incredibly valuable, and that's obviously why I'm engaging with it. But I really don't love doing it, and I don't feel in my comfort zone with it. But I didn't have Instagram at all for even my own personal use before I started working as an artist, and I hadn't ever used Instagram as an app. I'd never even been on it. I didn't know the first thing about Instagram or other social media platforms generally. So I was like, well, if you know nothing, then you're going to have to learn. And so I signed up for a course with someone called Dina Brodsky, called Insight for Artists is her website. And she's based in LA, and another person on Instagram who's an artist recommended it to me. And it was so valuable. And it, took me from knowing genuinely what do I even press when I open the app to feeling confident about a plan of what I needed to do, and what kind of how Instagram works, and the thinking about it from the other side. And she sort of knows people who work at Instagram and has quite a good insight into what it's all about from that angle. And so I just did exactly what she said to do. And it was quite a lot of effort to get into the rhythm of it, to remember to film little snippets of what you're doing and then bother to do all the videos at the end before you ship it off wherever it's going, and the courage to make yourself be okay with being in the video that you take sometimes. And then once I started doing what she said, it didn't all happen that quickly. It still took a bit of time. But I think along the way, I was also getting some following on Instagram from exhibiting art in the park and like being in actual physical galleries. And so that alongside doing what she kind of was suggesting in terms of the approach I was making to what I was putting on there came together, and suddenly it started really growing. And I had a few reels that went viral and got a massive amount of interest off the back of that. And then when I got to 100,000 followers, I was like, oh, right, well, I can sort of take my foot off the accelerator a bit. And that, came around the same time that I got pregnant. And so I then didn't post very much or put much time into it for a while, and now kind of reinvigorating and, getting back on there. And I've got all this content stored up from when I was pregnant that I wasn't really posting at the time very much. And yeah, I think for me, I really don't love doing it, but I found a way to do it through that course that it's not too burdensome and it's not interrupting my process in a way that's annoying or impacting the work. And so it's just something that I have to be disciplined about doing, like exercise.
Yeah.
But it's worth it, and it's valuable.
It will pay off.
And my favorite thing by far about it is the ability to make genuine connections with people who are real people, who are the artists or people who are interested in art. And some of the relationships that are born out of me doing that on Instagram are very special to me. And I have to, every time I'm kind of feeling sorry for myself about Instagram, I think back to that, and that helps motivate me to
that's great. That's so good that you've made those kind of positive connections. And do you feel like it actually helps you with selling your work?
Yes, definitely. I mean, obviously 100,000 followers is an awful lot of people who are in places where they're not realistically going to get my work shipped to them. Or, I mean, to be saying that, I've shipped work to some crazy places.
Really?
But there might not be people who buy original art, or they might not have the money to buy original art even though they'd want to, or they might be people who are following me because they are other artists and they're interested in what I'm doing as an artist and connecting with that. It's not all 100,000 people who want to buy a painting tomorrow.
No.
But out of the 100,000 people, there obviously is not an insignificant number of people that are born out of that. And I guess what's hard to know, though, is some of the people who are following me on Instagram are following me because they were following what I was doing as an artist, not on social media. And then when someone eventually gets around to buying something or commissioning something, sometimes it's not entirely clear to me whether they first encountered me on Instagram or they first encountered me in another way, and then that led them to follow me on Instagram. It's a really good platform, though, to communicate with people who are following my work. And it's actually, I think mailing lists, I also really don't love emails. And so I kind of am reluctant to just be like pestering people with getting a long mailing list and then emailing everyone every 2 weeks. And so I think I'd prefer to be putting stuff on Instagram, and then people who want to kind of seek it out and engage with it and put it into their feed can. And if somebody doesn't, then that's also fine. And so it's nice to give people little updates and insights and previews and that kind of thing.
Do you have any idea why those reels went viral? Do you think is there an actual trick to it?
I think when I did the course, she talks a lot about you got to be connecting with people and getting their attention and getting them to engage with what you're doing, because otherwise people just scroll past it. And so yes, obviously that's crucial. And for me, and I think a lot of artists, which is why her course is targeting specifically artists, that's the hardest part. But as an artist, that's the bit you've already done. You are making work. You're making work specifically for the purpose of creating an object that has no primary function other than to connect with other people. And so that is it. That's your art. It's there, it's done. That's the hard job. And so it's just then being able to get that in the right way in front of people. And so following her kind of suggestion of how to do that is then makes it, yeah, you're sharing something which has the purpose of being shared, of yeah. So just showing it in a way that makes sense to someone when they're there.
Yeah. And it must be so sort of gratifying to get so much response. I mean, quite often you'll have, 2,000 likes on something that you've put together, which is, even though it's not always about likes, it is nice to know that people are seeing some of your hard work, not just in the actual painting, but just putting together these posts, which is not easy. It's nice to get that feedback, and it must make you feel, well, it is worth it, it's worthwhile. Because so often with social media, you spend a lot of time getting stuff out and there's no response, and you just sort of feel like you're throwing stuff out into the ether for no particular reason almost. So, you're doing something right, that people are engaging in such a positive way, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think don't get me wrong, I was there at the start where you're posting stuff and getting literally no response at all. And you're like, oh my goodness. And I think it's almost like, it can feel like rejection. It can feel like you've put a lot of yourself and your vulnerability out there through your work onto this space where they're inferior people looking at it. And then there's nothing, and that can be kind of crushing. But I think you have to just remember that it's whether people are seeing it and responding to it is going to be much more about the algorithm and the way that you're putting it on there than what the work is. And it is not really you should never think negatively about your work because you're not getting a big engagement on Instagram or any other sort of, social media platform, TikTok or whatever people are doing. So I think, please, no one, I was there. I was that person equally, posting stuff, getting absolutely nothing, questioning everything about what I was doing. It is, and the course was transformative and making me realize that it wasn't about my work, and it was more about getting the way that you're doing it, getting Instagram to then put it in front of people. Because in the end, if no one is seeing it on Instagram, it's not that people are seeing it and not liking it or not reacting to it. It's just not getting any traction. If you put something in the back corner of a shop that no one goes into, and then you're upset that you haven't got any reaction to it or engagement with it, it's like, well, yeah, So you've got to learn how best to showcase it in a way that then it's going to get put in front of people.
Yeah. Fascinating, and great to do that course, and it must have been really amazing to do a course made for artists. I mean, that's incredible. Was that an online course or in person?
Online. So she is in LA, and I think all her courses are online. It works really well to be online, to be honest, because there's nothing that you need to be there in person for. It's her talking to you and showing you examples of how to do things that are on a digital platform. So it's very much a digital kind of format. Yeah.
It's probably worth it, isn't it? It's a great investment. And it's almost like it's the work that you did with Judy. You're investing in your profession, and marketing is part of what you do.
Yeah, I guess I don't see it as marketing, but I suppose, yeah, it is in a way, as just sort of communicating with people. But it's where the world is going, for better or worse. I have mixed feelings, especially as a mum, about Instagram and social media generally, and the impact it's having on us individually and as a society. But nonetheless, it is there, and it's a huge part of culture and society and communication. And you can choose, and I have full respect for people who decide that they are not, for whatever reason, gonna go there and engage with that and be part of that. And that is 100%, if that's what is important to your sense of identity, your well-being, your integrity, 100%, then you do you. But for me, I think I found value in communicating with people in that space, and that's just a virtue of the time and place that I am in the long history of human civilization. And, you know, I'm going to just join the party rather than sit on the sidelines and prepare what happens.
Yeah. And it's working for you and you do a beautiful job. So on to the questions. Okay, question time. Okay, so the first question, what would you say to somebody starting out on their creative artistic journey?
So I think looking back at how things have played out and evolved for me, when you're creating something in whatever medium, having that as much as you can, that conviction to do the best you can. And I think obviously, you know, you sort of think you're doing the best you can, but really push each idea, each composition, each piece of work in whatever medium to challenge yourself and to make it as great as you can, rather than, I think I found I could almost sort of be like, oh, well, you know, I did this and that worked quite well, so I'll just do something else that's off the back of that along similar lines. And I think where I've moved forward in my career and with my work is where I've really pushed myself. And I think that's only going to come from you. You'll get feedback, and that's always a tough thing as an artist, and listening with curiosity to what other people are saying about your work. And that doesn't mean that you take to heart what people are saying if it's not positive, or that you even change what you're doing necessarily, but be open to changing what you're doing. Be open to trying and experimenting with something that's a different technique, a different approach, a different way of you know, doing what you're doing, because it's not that you're doing it because someone's told you to. It's just that they may have sown the seeds of curiosity that you might find trying something different is interesting. And you may try it and think, no, you know, that's just not working. Or you may try it and actually that curiosity has led to you evolving in what you're doing as an artist. And I think I am really glad that I took on challenges that I almost didn't. You know, doing that first massive painting, I was tempted not to because it's scary, and it's putting a huge amount of time and a huge amount of materials into one thing, and then seeing what happens. And the stakes are a bit higher, but yeah, having that courage and the curiosity to move forward with what you're doing. And I think the imposter syndrome, which is just sort of talked about endlessly when you're talking to people, and it can be so lonely being an artist in your own little world of making, and hearing that other people can feel, you know, even people who are doing so well can feel this sense of imposter syndrome and not being confident. You're not ever an imposter of making work, of making art. I hope that when people ask themselves, am I someone who makes work, who is expressing my creativity in the form of work, that's not something you feel uncomfortable identifying with. And then it's like, well, everything beyond that is like, am I being valued by other people? And it's that being in the form of likes on social media or money or galleries, and that stuff is all a big mess of other people. And trying to just feel secure in that you're not an imposter of being an artist if you are making and you're putting yourself into what you're doing, and just hold on to that and don't overthink the rest of it too much, but just listen with curiosity and try things and see where it goes. Take opportunities.
Beautiful. Great advice. And what would you say is one of the biggest challenges of being an artist?
For me personally, time. Like, I just want to be able to make more work so that I can do more things that I'm so enthusiastic about the idea of doing, but I paint slowly and I'm not going to compromise on, obviously, the quality of what I'm doing to paint faster. So time is always a challenge.
Yeah, very common. And which artists inspire you in some way?
So there's a lot. a lot of artists that inspire me. I think obviously, Tim Wilson and his inspiration drawn from those old masters, and having come from the UK, I've obviously had a chance to see a lot of those paintings that are in Europe in real life. And I've had a long relationship with realism and with portraiture, and Tim Wilson's very much more landscapes and nature. And so a lot of my inspiration is definitely born out of that. And seeing, Botticelli and The Birth of Venus in real life was, I'm not going to forget that. Some memories, are potent. They stay with you. And equally seeing Klimt, the gold is seeing that, and the gold in real life, and you're like, ooh, that's kind of definitely stuck with me. And then I think there's some kind of fellow painters out there who I have immense respect for, and I think I find it inspiring to see people alongside me on their journey. And you did the interview with Bailey Lobb, and she's putting herself out there in a way that I just have so much admiration for, and I think what she's doing is so powerful. And after your podcast episode with Julie Battisti, I started listening to her podcast, and I was already following her for a long, long time as an artist. And her work is also, particularly the flower paintings are nature and realism, but not hyper-realism. And I think I was, drawn to what she was doing and really identified with that. And then her podcast is just another recommendation. If you're starting out as an artist, listen to her podcast, listen to your podcast. They have been so helpful at making me feel like I'm in a community of other people going through similar things, who have the same challenges and the same hopes. And her one in terms of talking about, like, how do I price a piece, or should I do prints, and these kind of questions that you're constantly grappling with and getting some better kind of answers and ideas to hold on to. And Matt Griffin is a realism painter who's up in Auckland, and does some kind of graffiti art and some oil painting, and he's just incredible, super, super talented. I mean, a lot of different people.
That's a great list, and nice to include some New Zealand artists there. And I am hoping to talk to Matt Griffin at some point. I have talked to him about doing it. He sort of like was not quite sure, but between us all and the listeners, we will convince him, hopefully.
I'll put in a recommendation for you.
Yeah, please do. And his partner as well. Yeah, that would be incredible.
She's also really great.
She's amazing.
No, I recommend, if anyone isn't familiar with him, definitely go check that out, because it's really cool. All
right, Anna. Well, thank you very, very much for being on the podcast. I have absolutely loved meeting you, and we've had such a fantastic chat around recording, and I have so much respect for your beautiful work. So all the best for your show, and hope to meet you and see your paintings in person one day.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm a massive fan of it. And as I kind of mentioned, I really recommend that people check out your podcast and similar ones like Judy's. They are just incredible, and you can have them on the background while you're driving or painting. And I have had a fantastic time chatting to you, and I just hope, this is a fun little insight into what I'm doing and why. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much to Anna Gibbs. It was so lovely to speak to you. And I just wanted to remind everybody that you can donate to the podcast if you'd like to, and that will really help with just ensuring that the podcast is sustainable. So you can make a donation of $3, $5, $8, or $10, and the link for that is in the show notes. That's and you can cancel any time. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your support.